Hello and welcome to our Real Talk sessions, the second block of day two of our Global Virtual Expo. And I'm starting off with Peter Abrahamsen. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Sigrid. Good to see you again.
Nice to have you here, Peter, psychologist, coach, and mentor, the emotional weightlifter at Better Lives, because he helps you create your better life. Thank you, Peter, for being here. And I would like to have you share in a conversation with us. I have to make it work for it to work. That is something often not really thought through by clients. I have had that in the past working with people, whether they write their book or whether they're coming into the expo. And I think you have that too with the audiences that you have working, particularly with professionals in the legal area, the law firms, or the individual lawyers. So, share, please, what is your experience around clients coming and expecting that it just works, or are you having to make sure you guide them that they have to work?
It's interesting, isn't it, when you work with people, because some people think, oh, I sign up with Peter, then it's problem solved. It's not. It is the beginning of a process of my client themselves solving the problem. And it starts already before we even have a session, because in my client consent form, the blurb that goes out that people sign on the dotted line, it says that I am not responsible for the results, the client are, but I am responsible for the process, which means I need to have an idea in my head, not about the outcome, because that's not for me to decide, but for how am I going to guide my client through this next session, which means it's always the client's agenda. I do take my notes as we go along and I do type them up afterwards. And I have an idea from session to session what we did last time. So I always know what I want to follow up and dig into again, or just check where are we on this, where are you on that, and how did that go.
Ah,
But
so
it is the
I just
client's responsibility to want to make it work.
I it just reminded me of something a client said to me once. She had another coach before and found that every time they started the next session or a new session, that particular coach had no real idea what they were up to, what they had discussed before. While I was doing what you are doing, I was up on it. I had my notes. And also, Peter, I just want to tap briefly into your uh, uh, direction, what you are doing. You are doing your own, you're taking your own notes and you're typing up your own notes. I think that is excellent as well. So, what that really shows is that you are making it work so that it works. It's part of that, isn't it, really?
It is, and in this day and age of artificial intelligence, I am testing out a note taker, but I'm only doing it with clients who would like their sessions recorded, because I have a confidentiality issue going that we don't quite know where do these recordings end up, and will they now end up in AI land, and all these conversations, are they being scrubbed somehow and put into chat GPT and such like tools. So there's a lot of debate at the moment amongst psychologists, psychotherapists, coaches, all these people who have confidentiality, whether we should use electronic means of taking notes. So I'm using something that you can get through Zoom. It's called Fathom, and it does a good job. It really does. It summarizes neatly and nicely, and you get a hyperlink for each point, and you can just click on that and you can see the video clip that relates to that. It's great. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't have my thinking. So
Mm.
it doesn't have the thoughts that I need to put in so that I can add that extra bit of value to my client next time. So all those things that happen in my head, it doesn't happen to AI. It listens and it summarizes and it's doing a good job of it. But I have to then work to make it work
Mm.
next time.
Mm.
so that I give my clients something that they can work with. Because at the end of the day, whether you're recovering from trauma or whether you would like your business to function better internally, when I leave, there has to be something left behind that they can work with. So it's not about me doing it to anybody or for anybody. I do it with everybody. And then in my one-to-one work, it's about getting my clients to the point of self-responsibility. That's the first thing I have to do always. Get people to take responsibility for their own life.
What would be
And
the
when they do that, they move on.
Yeah, absolutely. What would be the difference there in working with the business, the law firm as such? I know you still have a particular designated partner that you're working or talking to most of the time or all of the time, but what is the expectation there versus the individual? Now you're mapping it out already in the agreement that you send out, but what does it look like in reality and real life? The area of, well, I have work to make it work? Really?
Yeah. Um, for the individuals, it's typically about the individual's private life, home life in general. That could be partly work, it could be partly family, it could be all sorts of things, but it's very personal. When you move into the business side of things, it is a business that needs to function better. And as soon as we get in there, there are power dynamics, there are finance concerns, there's return on investment, there's all sorts of business considerations that someone like me needs to understand, which is why I'm working with businesses from a business perspective, not from a mental health or psychology perspective. Those are my tools, but the objectives are to make this operation, this law firm, this department, whatever it is,
Mm.
function better. And I go straight back to some of the from my consultancy days. We look at processes. We look at bottlenecks. We look at rework. I do in my head at least. I get into trouble for comparing a law firm with a factory because it's not fancy enough. But there's a lot of very smart people in manufacturing, I can tell you. So you always it's a process. No matter what we do, it's a process. There's a beginning and there's a middle and an end, and it should preferably be in that order. But what happens if it doesn't go straight down the ideal route in the flowchart?
Mm.
And those are the kind of things I have in mind when I work with businesses. I have a framework. I don't have a program because a program tells me that I already know what the problem is, I already know what the solution is, and I now have to fit that client into my model. Whether it fits or not, I'll make it fit somehow. I've come across consultants who work like that, and it always ends up with a lot of PowerPoint slides that say absolutely nothing, and a client that sits there wondering, well, okay, so what did I get from this? So my starting point is always to shut up and listen, and then ask a million and a half questions and listen some more. And then we figure out, okay, of the things that I offer or I can do, which ones are actually relevant. And sometimes we just start back to front as far as my thinking is already concerned, because it doesn't make sense to do it otherwise. Sometimes we do the whole lot, sometimes we home in on just one or two things. It all depends on the actual needs. So someone just said to me once, so Peter, we are basically just winging it, aren't you? Now that was a way of telling me, I don't trust people like you looking into my company. But there was a lot of truth in that statement. I am winging it because I don't know what I'm faced with. And that is what I work with to make work, that I have to do a lot of thinking on my feet. And I walk into sessions very often and I don't know what's coming at me. And I can't turn up then with a preconceived idea of today we're going to talk about this because it could be totally irrelevant to the client.
Mm. I think, particularly females, I'm just going to throw this in here without any attaching any meaning to it, would perhaps say, I'm using my intuition to go through the session. Is that something that you would use that term? Perhaps not.
We all we all have intuition.
Mm,
We all have gut feeling. We all have instinct. It's more or less developed in different people, and I think women are perhaps as part of the human species more developed in that area for whatever evolutionary reasons.
mm,
It's not that men can't or won't. I think maybe there's also a way of difference in vocabulary. Because if I say, well, I use my instincts, yeah, I know what I'm going to get back from certain business people. Exactly. Oh, so you're just winging it. You
I,
haven't a clue, have you? So sometimes I need to portray this image of, well, I've got it all sorted, all the hard and fast things, and at other times I need to be absolutely weaving my way around very intuitively and pick up. As I say, I listen between the lines, but I do that with all clients.
I think that is a key point, actually, Peter, because if you are not listening, you can't respond to take the conversation in the right direction. And the right direction is the one that the client actually starts on. Whether they know it or realize it or not is how I would probably see that. Would I be correct in thinking that? So you're not winging it, you are actually following what is being said because you are the observer, the detailed behind the scenes observer of what is being said from your professional background, what you know, how to take it into the next step, the next area. Do I see that correctly?
That is that is pretty much the way it works. However, I am the one who is supposed to offer the different perspective. I am the one who's supposed to challenge the status quo. So if I just follow along and become a yes man in the situation, I'm adding no value whatsoever.
Mm,
So yes, I have to follow where the client wants to go, but then it's also my job sometimes to say, you know what, that route is not taking you anywhere useful. Have you thought about another one?
mm.
Or we can always do three things. We can do something, we can do something else, or we can do nothing. And then let's weigh up the options. What's it costing you doing nothing? Well, this is where you are at the moment. So if you did nothing at all, you would still be here. That goes for business, that goes for life. You can choose to deal with your problems or not. And some people say, well, Peter's not problems, challenges. Aha, semantics. I think a problem is a problem, but the challenge is to solve the problem.
Well said. I like that. So it really is always comes down to that all of us, whether we are the ones guiding the client or whether we are the client in the situation, it is about ourselves having to work to make it work. I mean, that is
Mm.
just a particular phrase. You can rephrase that in many different, perhaps softer ways, but that is what it comes down to, isn't it? I have,
It is.
yeah.
And there's a step before that. It's not just having to make it work, that's wanting to make it work.
Ooh, I like that.
Because if your attitude, and I'm working hard to avoid the word mindset because my clients don't use mindset, they have attitude. So or attitudes. Um, so if your attitude is, okay, I need to work with Peter because my boss told me to, then I'm not going to get very far. But if the attitude to working with me or to changing things is that, things could be a lot better. I don't know how, but I want to find out how. And I've listened to all these suppliers and consultants and coaches, whatever they're all called. I like to work with Peter because we've had those conversations that
Mm.
cost me nothing. And I like his style and like what he's saying. So let's give that a go. And from that point onwards, they have to stand by their words because otherwise we won't get anywhere.
Yeah.
And and I started studying psychology because I was met with a lot of resistance in a previous job from the very people who hired me to put in change. They were then resistant to change because when all the changes started to hit the doors when it says director on the label. They didn't want to be part of it. It was just for the lower ranks. So a lot of initiatives died at that point because they didn't want to be part of changing. They wanted everything to be the way it was, but just different for everybody else.
And sometimes I would say they're not really clear on what they want to change or have different. Would that be something that fits? Yes, yes.
That is absolutely part of every conversation before we even get deep into the work. It is, what is it you want at the end?
Mm.
And I often get, well, I don't want this and I don't want that. Fantastic. So do you want the opposite? And very often, no, not quite. So it is, a lot of work needs to be put into defining, helping the client define for themselves, what does good look like? Mm.
Excellent.
And as soon as we know that, what's the end point? I did an onboarding with clients last night, in my last night, um, and um, it was couples therapy, which can be quite tricky. But the husband asked, "Well, I need to know what the end point is. Why are we doing this?" And they say, "Well, that's a fantastic question because I need you to tell me what the end point is, and I need each of you to tell me what your end point is, because
Mm.
then we can find out, is it the same or is it different? That will then inform what kind of work we've got in front of us."
I think that's a great note to conclude this particular talk on, Peter, because when people come to you and they are looking for you to give them the income, the end outcome, then they're not really working for it because they don't quite picture it in the sense that if to change what they want to change, they have to take a part of it. What would be your parting conclusion on that? That's very interesting.
I think no matter who you go to, it could be me, it could be somebody else. There is no magic wand, there is no crystal ball. If you want something different in your life, you have the power to change whatever it is you want to change. You may not get exactly to where you want to go because there are other things you can't control, but it is up to us as individuals to make the changes that we want to make for ourselves.
Excellent. Now, no magic wand. Some people do believe in a magic wand, but I believe what you are saying is right. We certainly have to take responsibility, go with an idea of what we want, and coming to you is the way to go to learn, to work, to make it work. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.